Hi, and welcome back to Fedmail. Good to see you on this Friday afternoon. Shabbat Shalom to you. I want to begin with some tragic news out of Shrewsbury, the small town outside of Worcester, just on the other side of Lake Quinsigamond, where yesterday an altercation over some graffiti that was purportedly being scrawled on a bridge in one of Shrewsbury's parks again led to an altercation that resulted in the shooting death of a Shrewsbury man. And when they arrested the suspect, the perpetrator apparently had political messaging, including Free Palestine, scrawled in very large, prominent letters on the front of his house. And while we don't yet know the motive for the attack, whether it was anti-Semitic or had anything to do with the political leanings or purported political leanings of the perpetrator, it certainly strikes a chord within the Jewish community. And over the last 22 months, dating back to October 7th, and actually before, we had raised the alarm about inciting rhetoric, the fact that many with a public voice, public office, other online social media entities, personalities with large followings had been engaging in propaganda, hyperbole, and inciting information or inciting statements. It's alarming that despite all of the concerns raised by the Jewish community, so much of this continues. And we can point to what happened in Boulder, Colorado, where there was an attack on Israel activists who were taking part in a Free the Hostages walk, or the attack in Washington, D.C. that took place outside of the museum, where two young Israel embassy staffers were gunned down. There's no question that inciting rhetoric and language is harmful to dialogue, and can unfortunately result in physical harm. So, we continue to call on all those with a public voice and a public platform to act responsibly, craft statements that are thoughtful and helpful to the dialogue, and not harmful because society desperately needs it. And that was my statement after yesterday's attack. So getting back to the information about that particular incident, if there's relevant information, we will continue to report it back to the community. Turning now to Israel, we provide a war update each week, and I hate to call it that, but I think that is how it's listed by Jewish Federations of North America, where it gives an update on a lot of the proceedings, what's happened each week. This week, the big news, the big headline was sadly what the IDF is referring to as a mistaken attack on Nasser Hospital in the Khan Yunis area that resulted in 20 deaths, some of whom were civilians and a number of whom were journalists. Now, the IDF immediately engaged in an investigation on this, which I think is important. It's important to note that when there is a mistake, or it's possible that a mistake has been made in the course of battle, the IDF immediately begins to investigate, and if they find wrongdoing, soldiers are punished for it. I talked to friends of mine who served in the IDF, and they all point out that there are very specific trainings that take place within the IDF to ensure that soldiers don't follow bad orders to harm civilians. And while in the course of battle, the fog of war, so to speak, particularly in urban warfare, like the fight in Gaza, that is the battlefield in Gaza, where you've got Hamas terrorists, operatives embedded among civilians. You also have times when Hamas operatives have posed as journalists and have used hospitals. It makes the complexity of this battle far more dangerous, far more deadly and difficult for the IDF. And nonetheless, it's important that very high standards are upheld, and that civilian casualties are avoided at whatever costs they can be. And that was what was reiterated by IDF High Command and by the Netanyahu administration. So it was a tragic situation, tragic deaths there, and hopefully the investigation uncovers what went wrong, what happened, and if it turns out that there was intentional wrongdoing, those responsible are punished for it. Also this week, earlier today, in fact, two bodies of two hostages were recovered. And this is somewhat of a rare occurrence over the course of the war since October 7th and since the ensuing military operation. Very few recoveries have happened. There were if I'm remembering right, a very small handful of hostages rescued alive from Gaza. But in this case, it's the remains of 2 hostages, one of whom was announced as a great hero of the fight of Be'eri, had stood his ground, had been part of the emergency response team, basically responsible for the security of that kibbutz that was overrun by Hamas operatives on that very dark and tragic day, October 7th, 2023. Also this week, the Houthis, the rebel group out of Yemen, launched a new type of ballistic missile at Israel that had multiple warheads, and Israel responded very loudly and strongly, attacking several targets in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, and taking out the head of Houthi leadership, as had been reported. So we'll see what that means. Also, in response to the IPC findings last week on the famine conditions in Gaza, which was somewhat of a new announcement that by a different group now that the situation had reached like critical proportions or a critical level. The Netanyahu government said they would redouble efforts to boost humanitarian aid going into Gaza. And I think that will mean new aid distribution sites, corridors. And as I had talked about it earlier, there are a number of analysts who suggest that Israel flood Gaza with as much aid as possible, which would take away one of Hamas's leverage or some of Hamas's leverage in the process of this, because Hamas undoubtedly is strengthened when the situation reaches a critical state, and you see that there are a number of Western countries that have come down very hard on Israel about this, but also on the ground by Hamas controlling if there's a scarcity and Hamas is able to control humanitarian aid, they're able to gain power from that. So a lot of analysts and military strategists have talked about this. Also, in Israel, it was announced this week that a pretty significant sum of money was being allocated to the Haredi population in advance of high holiday pilgrimages to the town of Uman in Ukraine, which is where Rabbi Nachman is interned and buried. And so that was also somewhat divisive legislation in Israeli society, as this situation is going on where there was massive call up of reservists to engage in this new operation against Gaza City. And you also have the Haredi draft bill that's proven to be controversial. So you've got a lot going on there, and more to come, I'm sure. In our own local news, we've got great news. Happy to announce that Joel Baker has agreed to serve as Federation's next president. We wish him a mazel tov. We will formally welcome him at the Federation's annual meeting in October. More information on that coming. Now for some upcoming events and programs. Here we go. We have Emek Medical Center, a delegation from that hospital, one of the largest hospitals in Israel, serving the northeastern part of the country, a really diverse clientele, diverse patient base, coming on September 7th. There's a brunch in the morning, then they're going to be taking a tour of UMass, then they will be joining for a very special doctors group dinner. So make sure you check out the information. Call us if you need more about that. Then on September 9th, there is a Sip and Craft pre-high holiday event. That's the 16th of Elul. Yeah, we're already in Elul. The Torah Center and Federation are putting that on. That looks awesome, and we are happy to be doing that. Then on September 11th, we have one of the top Middle East analysts, a guy named Greg Roman from the Middle East Forum. We'll be speaking at the JCC Reflections on September 11th. You can find the flyer below. And then big event, September 30th, Rabbi Meir Soloveichik speaking at Assumption. And that is one you absolutely don't want to miss. So look at all of the great things our community has to offer, and we appreciate all of your support. In the meantime, Shabbat Shalom, and enjoy the holiday weekend. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.